If you've watched this channel before, perhaps you're familiar with my movie situation, which is I hardly ever watch movies nowadays, for a couple reasons. The biggest reason is my kids. I've got two very young kids. We live in a small apartment. There's just no space for me to sit and watch a movie for 2 hours. The second reason is I don't really have access to a lot of movies. I live out in Vietnam. There's no DVD store next to me. I don't have a Netflix or streaming account or anything, so I'm pretty much just limited to whatever movies I can find on YouTube. However, there can be some interesting movies on YouTube if you know where to look or if you stumble across them. About a month ago, a friend of mine and fellow blogger, Whiskey Prager, posted a link to the Rat Pack movie, which is a 1998 made for HBO movie, and posted it on his blog and talked about his experience watching it. And I made a mental note that the next time I got the apartment to myself, this might be an interesting movie to watch, seeing as how it was posted for free on YouTube. And then this past week, I had the apartment to myself last night. The kids were out, so I watched this movie, and now I'm going to share my thoughts with you about it. So first of all, it is on YouTube. I don't think it's legally on YouTube, so it might not stay on YouTube very long, but it's on YouTube at the moment, and I'll leave a link in the description down below. The copy is, I would describe it as not perfect quality, but good enough quality. It seems to be, as far as I can tell, maybe ripped from a VHS recording. There's a little bit of a line on the top. The picture's a little fuzzy, but it's perfectly watchable. The sound quality, I don't know. It's good enough. I found actually when I put on the headphones, I found the audio was crystal clear. When I was playing without headphones, I found the audio maybe was I had a little bit of trouble catching some of the dialogue at times, but you know, check it out, see what your own experience is. I'll leave a link in the description down below, etc. All right. So a little bit of background on this movie before we get into it. As I mentioned before, this was a made-for-HBO movie that came out in 1998. And I think I actually vaguely remember this coming out at the time. I didn't see it at the time, but I remember reading reviews of it. It got a little bit of publicity at the time it came out. Part of the reason it got a little bit of publicity was, I believe, the late 90s were a time of renewed nostalgia for the Rat Pack, for a couple of reasons, or maybe 3 reasons, as far as I can tell. And if anyone here knows better, let me know. But number 1 was the death of Frank Sinatra, which occurred in 1998 and set off a whole wave of nostalgia and reassessing of Frank Sinatra's legacy. And if you weren't around back then, it was a pretty big deal at the time. It was a big media event about how the death of Frank Sinatra marked the end of an era. Now, I am what they call a Xennial, someone born between Generation X and Generation Y. So after Frank Sinatra's heyday, and I was a little bit mystified at the time what the big deal about Frank Sinatra was. I always thought his music was pretty old and boring, and couldn't imagine who would like it. But, you know, my roommate, who was from Chicago, was telling me how popular Frank Sinatra was with the mobsters because of his mob ties, and that's why a lot of tough guys from Chicago really like his movies. And opened my eyes a little bit to this whole kind of outlaw romance that was behind the Frank Sinatra legend. The other reason I think there was a wave of nostalgia for the Rat Pack is just because there was maybe a wave of nostalgia generally for things from the baby boomers' youth at the time. So the baby boomers were going through midlife at this time, and there was a lot of stuff in the media that was nostalgic from their childhood. Now, I think, again, somebody correct me if I'm getting this wrong, I don't think the baby boomers were active fans of the Rat Pack. I think the Rat Pack was considered a little square even back in their heyday. I mean, I know it sounds a little bit funny to call the Rat Pack square because this movie, this 1998 movie, spends like 2 hours talking about how cool they are and don't you want to just be like them and these are every man's dream and stuff like that. So, like, granted, they were hip within their own circle, but for the younger generation coming up, I think they regarded the Rat Pack as kind of the establishment, and they were more into Elvis and the Beatles and the Monkees, etc. But these guys were on TV all the time. I think I didn't live through that era, but from what I can tell, you know, if you look any of them up on Wikipedia, they all had their own variety show at one point or another during the 1960s. Joey Bishop had his own show. Dean Martin had his own show. Sammy Davis Jr. had his own show. It looks like they were on TV a lot. So I think the baby boomers just grew up with these guys as media icons in their youth, even though maybe the real target audience would have been their dads. So like my grandparents' generation, except my grandpa would have hated them. I probably did hate them because he was a conservative Dutch Protestant. So there would have been a certain there was a certain slice maybe of older men in the 60s that middle-aged men in the 60s that this is appealed to. I don't know. But the other reason I think there was a little bit of wave of Rat Pack nostalgia in the 90s was because if you were old enough to remember the 90s, you will remember that there was that swing music revival that happened in the 90s, right? Where swing music became popular again. And the Rat Pack was kind of associated with that in a way that always struck me a little bit strange at the time. Because I always thought the Rat Packers were more like crooners, not really like swing, like not like Benny Goodman type swing, right? But there was, I don't know, did they have some swing music in the repertoire as well? Or maybe they were just associated with it because they were retro enough to kind of look the part. But I remember during that swing revival, there would be a number of clubs that would do swing nights. And I remember going to some of these, and they would have like Rat Pack movies on the big screen. The sound would be off. They'd be playing swing music, swing revival music, but you'd be able to see the visuals of Frank Sinatra and his guys in the background. So I think it was more they just looked the part, but I could be wrong. Maybe they were associated with swing music. Anyways, as you might be able to tell, I plan on intermixing this review with my own opinions about the Rat Pack. But maybe I'll just give a capsule review real quick. I thought this movie was perfectly fine, interesting. According to Wikipedia, it got rather mixed results at the time. 57% on Rotten Tomatoes, 6 out of 10, so, slightly better than average. The site's critic consensus reads, "Well, this movie evokes its time period with a keen sense of swagger. The Rat Pack is troubled by uneven lead performances and fairly routine biopic trappings." And if you go to Rotten Tomatoes, you can read a lot of mixed or negative reviews about this. I think some of those negative reviews might be a reaction against the publicity that accompanied this when it first premiered on HBO. And again, there was, if memory serves, there's a fair amount of publicity accompanying this release because it was right in the middle of all this Rat Pack nostalgia. And so maybe if this had been hyped up and you were really expecting like a movie event, this would have been a disappointment. But in terms of like movies that you just watch for free because they're on YouTube one night when you've got a free night because the kids are out, this is totally passable. It's interesting, gets into some interesting details behind their lives, doesn't go on for too long. Maybe some of the performances could be a little bit better. I mean, like the guys they have doing Jack Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy don't seem anything like Jack and Bobby Kennedy, but you let those go. It's fine. It's entertaining. It's perfectly entertaining. And I might be right in the perfect audience for this because I'm somebody who's maybe vaguely interested in some of the details about the Rat Pack, but doesn't really know a lot. So I actually learned a lot from this. You know, since we are living in the age of Wikipedia, I did what everybody does nowadays, which is after I saw the movie, I got on Wikipedia and I looked up tons of stuff, and there was some stuff I couldn't track down, and I'm just letting that go. You'll have to excuse me. I'm not a professional reviewer, so there are some threads I couldn't find easily and just let them go, and maybe I'll throw them out to the audience, to the audience of this video to see if anybody knows anything. But what I did find largely backed up what was in this movie. At least according to my Wikipedia research, it seems fairly accurate. Because that is always a caveat you have to give with these biopic movies. Some of them are more accurate than others, and sometimes you see the movie, right, and you're like, oh, that's really interesting. I really learned a lot from that, and then you find out later that like the biopic was mostly fabricated or it was a lot of made up stuff. So that caveat being given, that maybe there might be some fabricated or made up stuff in here, but as far as I can tell, looking stuff on Wikipedia, it sounds pretty interesting. It sounds pretty accurate. So my own interest in the Rat Pack. I've tried to understand the appeal of Frank Sinatra. I really can't. Although I find him somewhat interesting as just like, I'm mystified by his appeal. Like every time I watch a program on him or listen to his music, I try and clue in like, okay, why do people like this guy so much? Dean Martin is another guy from the Rat Pack I find interesting. I first heard about Dean Martin when I was a teenager or something. I was watching a documentary on, I think it was the Biography Channel, or maybe it was the show Biography on A&E, and they were talking about Jerry Lewis, the comedian, who was Dean Martin's partner for a period of 10 years from 1946 to 1956. They were Martin and Lewis, or Jerry and Dean. And Dean played the straight man. He was like the handsome singer. And Jerry Lewis was like the nutty, zany comic. And they would play off each other for a series of 10 years, a whole series of movies, until they had a falling out and went their separate ways. So I first learned him as associated with Jerry Lewis's story, and then later found out that he had a whole second half of his career as like part of the Rat Pack. So I thought that was interesting. I also sometimes, every now and again, would go down these rabbit holes of watching clips of them on YouTube. And I was a little fascinated both with Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin, because they were in the public spotlight for so long, both of them, from when they were really young in the 1940s, and then they both got old on camera. So it was just fascinating to see. Okay, here's a clip of them. They're just babies in the 1940s. Here they are in the 1950s. Here they are in the 1960s and 70s, looking middle-aged, and then another 10 or 20 years, and they're starting to look decrepit. Jerry Lewis hung around a long time, and age took its toll on him. And I was just kind of fascinated about seeing what age does to a person and how you can see it happen over time. I think that was something that fascinated me more when I was younger. Now that I'm older, aging is less of a mystery, or it's less exotic. I don't need to go on YouTube. I can just look in the mirror, or look on Facebook to see the people I went to high school with, and see how much age changes the way a person looks. Sorry, I'm going off on a few digressions, aren't I? The other guy I had kind of gotten interested in a few years ago was Peter Lawford. Now, Peter Lawford appears to be an interesting guy. A few years ago, I used to watch old episodes of Alfred Hitchcock Presents off of YouTube. Alfred Hitchcock Presents was something that we Zennials grew up with because it was rerun on Nick at Night in the 90s, so I used to watch some episodes of it then. And then there seemed to be a lot of episodes uploaded to YouTube, and they always do the YouTube thing where they're uploaded and then taken down by the copyright holders. But years ago, I saw an episode where there was this this good-looking, suave guy was playing this British con man, this English con man with like a proper English accent and really good looking, and was really playing the job of like the suave con man. And after that episode finished, I thought, that guy's got to be famous. He just looks too good looking and suave to. And, Alfred Hitchcock Presents would quite often bring in famous actors for like one-off episodes. So I looked him up, and then sure enough, he was the brother-in-law to Kennedy. He had married one of Kennedy's sisters. So part of the Kennedy clan, and also part of the Rat Pack, which is Peter Lawford. So I guess that's the extent of my interest in these characters. Other than maybe just like a general interest in old retro stuff. I'm the kind of I'm the kind of person who takes an interest maybe in older pop culture. I mean, I don't always know a lot about it, but I take an interest in it sometimes. All right. So, with all that out of the way, finally, let's get to this movie, huh? The movie, in my opinion, starts off with a little bit of a confusing framing device. Because it starts off with Frank Sinatra when he's really old, getting on stage to perform and talking about how he misses his guys. And then there's a flashback to a time that's not clearly specified in the movie when he's younger. But then we get, he's singing a song, montage of newspaper clippings, which are giving like the history of the people in the Rat Pack. And I thought maybe this was their whole life history, but this is their history up until 1958 or 1959 when this movie starts. This movie is not a complete cradle-to-grave history of the Rat Pack. It actually just kind of focuses in on a couple years around the election of John F. Kennedy and then the fallout from that. So from like mostly 1960 to 1962. I thought it was going to be like the whole story of these guys, but it's not, and it's all the better for that, really. Now, I guess the Rat Pack itself, I never explained what the Rat Pack was, did I? Okay, you never know. Some people might not know, right? Because, like I said, I'm familiar with the Rat Pack because there was a wave of Rat Pack nostalgia in the late 90s. But is anybody nostalgic for the Rat Pack now? Do kids born after the 90s know what the Rat Pack is? I don't know. Let me know in the comments what your experience with the Rat Pack is. The Rat Pack, according to Wikipedia, or depending on who you ask, there were a couple different iterations of it. But the most famous iteration was Frank Sinatra and a group of people he had around him, who were kind of like his posse. And they would appear in movies together, and they would appear on the stage together. I read in the course of searching out information about this movie after I saw it, I read one article saying it was Sinatra's attempt to get a boy band together. Except they weren't boys, they were middle-aged. So Sinatra was 45 at the time. Now, granted, I think he was the elder among them, but they were all kind of in their late 30s or 40s, I think, right? And that was, the main members were Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, who I've already mentioned, Peter Lawford, who I've already mentioned, Sammy Davis Jr., who I haven't talked about yet, but he was the black one. Sorry to identify him by his race, but it was a big deal at the time because this was back in the days of segregation, and it's a big plot point of the movie, him dealing with the racism. So, and then Joey Bishop, who I haven't talked about at all yet, and who I don't really know anything about, or very little. I've picked up a little bit just now, just researching this movie. But the movie largely ignores Joey Bishop. He's always around, but he doesn't really have any storylines or anything. He's just kind of in very little lines. Joey Bishop, I guess, was the comedian who hung around with them, were part of the Rat Pack. Right. So, oh yeah, the Rat Pack, I think, in their iteration with those five guys, really only lasted a couple years, anyways, for reasons that are explained through the movie. So the movie opens with these guys all having a history. So, which is alluded to. Frank Sinatra has been already through a couple different cycles in his career. Through a couple different high-profile divorces, etc. So they're carrying around some baggage, which is alluded to in the dialogue of the movie. But it's one of those movies which is throwing a lot of things at you. And perhaps in 1998, people were a little bit more aware of this stuff. Again, kind of baby boomer nostalgia and stuff like that. I think nowadays, you maybe spend a little bit more time on Wikipedia kind of looking up who Ava Gardner is and stuff like that. Peter Lawford, who I mentioned earlier, is that British gentleman I saw in an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents once, is maybe largely the driver of the plot in this movie, in that he is the guy who is caught between Sinatra and the Kennedy family, and both of them are making demands on him, and Peter is portrayed as I think Sinatra calls him sniveling at maybe a few different points in the movie, portrayed as somebody who's very afraid of both of them. And I don't really know a lot about the real Peter Lawford other than what I've read on Wikipedia and that Alfred Hitchcock Presents episode I once saw. And the Alfred Hitchcock Presents, he is presented as like a sensitive English gentleman. So you can kind of imagine where he doesn't have a tough guy persona. On the other hand, I kind of want to say that anyone who has enough guts to kind of scrape through Hollywood and make it in show business must have some sort of spine, right? I understand he plays a refined gentleman on the screen, but I was thinking he couldn't be this famous. He couldn't have made it to be this famous and also this spineless. The movie opens and Peter Lawford, Frank Sinatra is at a dinner with some of the Kennedys and Kennedy's sister, who is Peter Lawford's wife. And Peter Lawford is invited to the party, sees Sinatra, and is absolutely terrified. And there's some sort of history that they have between them, which is only briefly alluded to. And vaguely alluded to, but Sinatra did something to Lawford in the past that Lawford is terrified of. Now, I went to Wikipedia. I couldn't find what they were talking about. I did some searching. I guess Lawford at one time was photographed with Ava Gardner, who was Sinatra's wife at the time, and the movie is alluding that Frank got some sort of revenge on Lawford because of that photograph. Now, I suspect that Wikipedia there's more going on than is on the Wikipedia page. And so, if I had read the actual biographies of all these people, maybe I would be more aware of the scandals. At the same time, though, of all the people watching this movie, who has read all the biographies and stuff like that, right? Again, maybe this was more in the cultural knowledge in 1998, but yeah, nowadays people just go to Wikipedia, right? If it's not on Wikipedia, it's just going to go over the heads of most of the audience. So a lot of the movie is like that, where it's throwing out allusions to stuff. Wikipedia can help you. Now, it sounds like I'm complaining. And maybe I'm complaining a bit, but on the whole, it's interesting. You go to Wikipedia, you look some stuff up. You can't track down everything, but it's interesting to learn a few things, to track down a few things. So even though I couldn't verify everything, I did find this interesting. So I've largely enjoyed the experience. But where was I going with this? Right. So for the rest of the movie, Peter Lawford's character is going to be having demands put upon him by both the Kennedy family and by Sinatra. And at the very end of the movie, Peter Lawford is a very thankless errand boy who has to go and tell Sinatra that Kennedy won't be staying at his house after all, because Sinatra's ties to organized crime just make it too much of an embarrassment. And then Sinatra goes nuts and throws Lawford out and says, okay, no more movies for you. You're done. We're writing your part out of Robin and the Seven Hoods. And sure enough, you go to Wikipedia, and that was indeed the end of Peter Lawford's association with the Rat Pack for exactly that reason, exactly as it's portrayed in the movie, it looks like. And so that was kind of the end of the Rat Pack, as at least with its original lineup. That they did a few more movies without Peter Lawford. I guess Joey Bishop had a fall out with Frank Sinatra a couple years later or shortly afterwards, 62, which I guess was actually around the same time Peter Lawford got kicked out. No, the movie, like I said, barely portrays Peter Bishop, so this was just stuff I wasn't on Wikipedia, but I just Googled Joey Bishop and Frank Sinatra and found out that they had like this stupid fight over Frank Sinatra had asked Joey Bishop to cover for him at the last minute in the nightclub. Joey Bishop felt like he was being like not respected and being kind of ordered around, so he made all these demands. Frank Sinatra took affront to it, and that was the end of Joey Bishop in the Rat Pack. That wasn't in the movie, but I share that with you because I took the trouble of tracking it down, so maybe that might be interesting for you to know, huh? You never know. Anyways, back to this movie, which I've barely talked about, even though I've been rambling on now for a half hour. Frank Sinatra is very enamored with Kennedy and wants to do everything he can to help Kennedy win the election. Now, exactly why he's so enamored with Kennedy is explained just in the movie that he likes Kennedy's style. And he feels, as he says in the movie, that America doesn't need more stuffed shirts. America needs kind of like a new blood, new energy. And it's a little bit strange in the movie because he seems to genuinely believe that he is doing what is best for America, that America really needs Kennedy. Like, this is really important. But his reasons are all just Nixon is stuffy and Kennedy is fun and fresh. Which makes me wonder if the movie is oversimplifying things a little bit. Or, you know, who knows? Maybe Sinatra maybe that really just was his perspective. I don't know. Peter Lawford is recruited into the Rat Pack, and that's kind of the connection to Kennedy. Sinatra and his friends do a bunch of campaigning for Kennedy and then party with the Kennedy brothers. Marilyn Monroe shows up in one scene, accompanied by Joe DiMaggio. Now, here's something I didn't realize. I knew that Marilyn Monroe had married and divorced Joe DiMaggio and then married Arthur Miller afterwards. But I didn't know that Joe DiMaggio had kind of stuck around after that. The movie portrays Joe DiMaggio as being really jealous about Marilyn Monroe. And Marilyn Monroe says, "You're not my husband anymore. I married, what's his name? The guy who wrote Death of a Salesman." I think she gets the name wrong when she says it. What did she say? Death. Anyways. Yeah. So I had known that, but what I didn't know until I saw this movie, and I checked it out on Wikipedia, and this part checks out as well, that they had a tumultuous marriage, and then Monroe divorced him, but Joe DiMaggio never stopped being devoted to Marilyn Monroe, and he was still kind of romantically involved with her, even with her other marriages, her other marriage. That was another little interesting tidbit. But anyways, Marilyn Monroe, Joe DiMaggio, the Rat Pack, the Kennedy brothers, they're all partying together. Kennedy's father, Joseph Kennedy, the old patriarch of the Kennedy family, calls Frank Sinatra in, and he wants... first of all, he orders Frank Sinatra to kind of cut his ties with people who are going to hurt Kennedy politically. Now, again, this is something I didn't know, but I guess at the time, Kennedy was following in Kirk Douglas's footsteps of hiring a blacklisted communist screenwriter to write a screenplay. Of course, Kirk Douglas famously did the same thing with Spartacus. Spartacus came out in 1960, so must have been right around the same time. And in fact, they reference that in the movie. Sinatra said, well, Kirk Douglas did it, so I can do it. But Joseph Kennedy puts his foot down. Says, either cut your ties with this blacklisted screenwriter, or you can have nothing to do with the campaign. And so Sinatra gives into that. And then they want Sinatra to use his mob ties to help Kennedy win the election. Now, I didn't spend a lot of time researching this on Wikipedia. I did look up a couple stuff. I couldn't find much. I think how much the 1960 election, I know it's been widely rumored that the mob helped Kennedy win through kind of shady election things. But how much of that is actually proven? And how much of that is just rumors? Yeah, but that's something that the movie plays into. And the movie makes it seem like Sinatra is the guy who made that happen. So essentially, Sinatra is the person who put Kennedy into the White House. But then Bobby Kennedy gets appointed Attorney General, and Bobby Kennedy cracks down on organized crime. Now, again, this is something, I guess, I don't know if I've ever thought about this before. I mean, I knew that Bobby Kennedy had done a crackdown on organized crime when he was Attorney General. And I also knew that it was widely rumored that the Kennedys had connection with organized crime, which is how they got elected in 1960. I'm not sure if I ever kind of put the two and two together and realized that was a contradiction. But it's a contradiction that the movie lays into, with the mob feeling very betrayed that they had helped get the Kennedys elected, and now Bobby Kennedy's coming after them. Frank Sinatra now is caught in the middle of this, and he's got to sort things out. But now the Kennedys don't want anything to do with him because Frank Sinatra is associated with the mob. Yeah. So I mean, as maybe you can tell from my summary of the movie, this is a very political look at the Rat Pack. I mean, it could almost have been renamed as John F. Kennedy and the Rat Pack, or